The Callisto Protocol lied to players from the very beginning. Since the game was first announced, Callisto set up expectations that it didn't deliver, promised things that weren't there, and compared itself to a game it couldn't compete with. This is how the marketing failed the Callisto Protocol. Hey everybody, today I decided to change things up and stay in the closet.
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
You're grossed out? Good. Then you're ready to play the Callisto Protocol. I'm Peach, and welcome back to the Pit, also known as Hell. And we're going to take a look at how the marketing failed the Callisto Protocol. And had the developers taken a different approach to their marketing, the game might have been received very, very differently.
It's a 3! It's a 3 out of 10! I didn't want to finish it. I'm very angry.
That makes it really tough for me to say that I do not recommend this.
Yeah, this game runs like absolute garbage, and it's also not that fun.
But first, how does one accurately describe marketing? The best and simplest description I know is essentially asking the question, how do you get somebody to buy something?
Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
What steps do you take to get that person to make a purchase? Let's dive into the steps the Callisto Protocol took. The beginning of this journey to disappointment and lackluster sales started in June 2019 with the formation of the development team Striking Distance Studios. The studio was formed with the sole purpose of expanding PUBG's universe with a story-driven game. Yes, you heard right. PUBG, the battle royale with a frying pan. Well, the owners and publishers of PUBG, Krafton, decided they wanted to expand and build upon the universe that PUBG existed in. That is where the new development team at Striking Distance Studios comes in. This studio will be led by the great Glenn Schofield. Known for such incredible games as Call of Duty World War II.
Keep the enemy from building the bridge. The enemy is building a bridge. The bridge is being built. They're building a bridge.
Call of Duty Advanced Warfare.
What you're seeing is advanced warfare.
But he was also one of the creators of the original survival horror classic, Dead Space. But we'll come back to that a little later. The Callisto Protocol was officially announced at the Game Awards in December 2020.
The Oscars, you know?
The announcement was made with a cinematic reveal trailer showcasing some of the survival horror elements and a bit of the world it was in, but didn't really give any concrete gameplay details outside of it's a third-person single-player game. During this reveal, Glenn Schofield sat down with various news outlets, including IGN, to kind of discuss the details surrounding the game. He told them that there's a big combined effort to flesh out the PUBG universe, and that the Callisto Protocol will be set within that universe just 300 years into the future. To quote old Glenny Boy, from what I hear, Dead Space was one of the scarier games of its generation, and I want to do the same on next gen. He then went on to say, you got to see the graphics. The graphics are just freaking amazing now. We're getting so detailed, it slows us down on production. You know what I mean? We can get so detailed now and fit those graphics on the screen, it takes a lot of time to build it. My goal, and the goal of the team, is to make the scariest game on next gen platforms. So if that's what you want to play, that's what we're bringing.
Not this time. It's a total fabrication.
Here is where the marketing officially started for this game, and where it immediately got set off on the wrong foot.
Oh my god! Oh jeez, oh my god!
During this reveal and interview, 3 major things got highlighted. 1, that the graphics are amazing. 2, that they're attempting to make the scariest game ever, or at least of this generation. And 3, that it was made by the original creator of Dead Space. Remember these 3 points, and this will set up 3 major marketing issues that we will discuss later in the video. But suffice to say, the Callisto Protocol was doomed from the start. Also, if this video is tickling your fancy, yes, I said that, then be sure to spank that subscribe button. Immediately after the reveal, the articles and fan speculation were constantly circulating about what the game could be and what it would offer. But given the information provided at the reveal, it kind of sounded like the game would be a more modern, sleeker, and scarier Dead Space, but set in the PUBG universe. And this brings us to the very first marketing blunder. In May 2022, studio head Glenn Schofield said in a tweet that the game is no longer part of the PUBG universe. When creating a product and designing the marketing around that product, you need to get your messaging clear and concise from the very start. You need to plan out exactly what you're going to do, what you're going to say, and how you're going to say it. The Callisto Protocol, at its announcement, stated it was part of the PUBG universe. This creates expectations on what the game will be, and what it will incorporate into its story and its world, and also creates a connection to a very specific community, that being the PUBG community.
This game sucks! It's terrible!
When they decided to switch universes mid-development, it highlighted a few things. First off, it shows a potential lack in vision if the story and world aren't even fully fleshed out halfway through development. And two, inconsistent messaging can confuse consumers and players. Because not every player is going to be aware of Glenn's tweet, there's going to be a section of players that will still think it's connected to the PUBG universe in some way, and still part of that world. These players will go into the game assuming there's a connection and a world that isn't actually there. This can cause general confusion about what the game might be. And three, by aligning yourself with a franchise, you're attempting to get the fans of that franchise to associate the positive feelings they have with their favorite franchise with your product. Star Wars has absolutely nothing to do with McDonald's, but by aligning with popular characters and worlds and stories, McDonald's can get people to associate those positive feelings they have for Star Wars with their french fries. However, if you align your product with a specific franchise and then don't deliver, you risk having the fans of that franchise turning against you and your product. But anyway, shortly after the departure from the PUBG universe, we would get the first gameplay reveal in June 2022. And this was actually a really good trailer. We didn't see a whole lot of uncut footage, but this trailer showcased some of the enemies, the creepy locations, and the variety of weaponry we could be using in the game. We also got a good look at the gore the game would introduce, with some particularly brutal ways the player dies. Online sentiment was incredibly high and positive, with tons of players complimenting the game on how good it looks, the creepiness, the combat, and of course the Dead Space vibes it was giving off, and that it's from the creators of Dead Space. More gameplay would follow a couple of months later, showcasing even more of what we have already seen, with potential customers getting a good look into how some of the game would unfold. And this was also a really good trailer with some very positive online sentiment. The hype for the game was building, and the players were getting more and more excited, and the marketing was ramping up even more. Leading up to the launch of the game was an incredibly intense marketing push, with story trailers, a full fleshed out podcast with some top-notch voice talent, and interviews upon interviews with the studio head Glenn Schofield. Continuing his promises of the scariest game ever made, taking what he learned from Dead Space and improving on it, praising the high-quality graphics, and detailing all of the intense gore you would see from the player death scenes. But this period also had its marketing issues and controversy, starting with the tweet Glenn made promoting crunch culture at his studio. Crunch culture is essentially overworking employees to attempt to deliver as strong a game as possible at launch. Crunch culture often includes 12 or 14-hour days, working weekends, and even sleeping in the office. It's a very negative workplace culture and has received extensive criticism in the past in the gaming industry. And the fact that Glenn was seemingly promoting this crunch culture showcases a little bit of being out of touch with the gaming community, but also shows a little bit of a lack of proper development planning, so crunch never has to be a thing. The second controversy was the reveal of the Season Pass. Now that part isn't controversial, it's normal for a game to plan out future DLCs and future content, and it's a way to make more money for less than making a full new game. The issue that came about, however, in the Season Pass was that it was detailed that there would be extra player death animations in future DLC. Now the thing with something like a death animation is it requires a motion capture actor to do the actions, the animator team to transfer that into the game, and the programming team to make that work in the game's world. Now, in order to minimize costs, time, and effort, a company will generally try to do all of their motion capture at one time, because then they only need to bring the actor and pay them once, they only need to rent equipment and rent a space once, and they only need to have all of their employees there once. Now, additional animations being sold later kind of signals that the most likely scenario here is that the developer Striking Distance Studios created these animations and then later cut them out of the main game to sell them as future DLC. At the very least, this was the player perspective. And while the studio lead Glenn did tweet saying no, these animations would be created later after the game launched, the damage had already been done for a lot of people. And the issue with marketing blunders such as this is that most people aren't following this story close enough to catch the clarification or apology around these blunders, meaning you may have just lost more customers. Both of these controversies showcase the importance of being very clear and very precise with your messaging. For example, if Glenn had run his tweets by a marketing department first, the crunch controversy could have been avoided. And for the extra DLC animations, they could have gotten ahead of the situation by detailing that these weren't in production yet or something similar. Messaging is absolutely critical in marketing. Properly planning out and getting your message right from the very start, setting the correct expectations, and getting ahead of what will be perceived negatively are essential to effective game launches and marketing campaigns. But once these controversies were over, it was launch time. The game would release on December 2nd, 2022 to pretty darn mixed reviews. It received massive amounts of backlash on release on Steam for serious performance issues and stuttering, a problem that Glenn Schofield would later blame on somebody else, with heavy criticisms being weighed against the game on all platforms for its incredibly linear story, frustrating combat system, a cliffhanger ending, just simply not being that scary, and ultimately not living up to the name of Dead Space. The result? A serious backlash of unsatisfied players, poor reviews, and a seriously underperforming game. The publisher, Krafton, had hoped to sell 5 million copies of the game, but shortly after they revealed that it was going to be tough to even make the 2 million copies sold mark. Couple that with an enormous game budget of 162 million USD, and you've got a serious misfire of a game. Now, the developers, Striking Distance Studios, were pretty quick to try and fix the game. The next day, they released a patch on Steam that would fix a lot of the performance issues, and just a couple of weeks later, they would release a bigger patch that would change the way the combat performed to make it significantly less frustrating and improve the flow. But by this point, all of the reviews had come out, and the negative perception of the game had taken place. You only get one chance at a good impression, and the impression that the Callisto Protocol gave was misaligned with what players were expecting. And this is where the issues of marketing really come into play. At the very beginning of the marketing for the Callisto Protocol, and throughout the entire marketing cycle, the developers kept stressing several key points. It's from the creator of Dead Space, it's got amazing graphics, and it would be the scariest game ever made. These create several huge problems if you can't deliver on these promises. The first promise is that this game would be just like Dead Space, if not better.
What's scarier between Callisto or Dead Space?
Got me there, Callisto.
Whenever you compare yourself to another beloved franchise or product,
Dead Space, like a Dead Space, Dead Space, Dead Space. Different than Dead Space. Dead Space, Dead Space, Dead Space, Dead Space. Dead Space was 2 seconds later. Dead Space.
And if it's a key aspect of your marketing, your game needs to deliver. If it wasn't designed in the same gameplay style and the same gameplay quality, as was the case with Callisto and Dead Space, you will generate backlash and negative impressions of the game. You're trying to live up to a legacy that you're not even fully designing your game around. The second problem is the heavy focus on graphics as a main selling point of the game. Now, amazing graphics are very nice and definitely do add to a gaming experience, but it cannot be a main selling point of the game. People don't buy games to look at them, they buy games to experience them.
Oh, sweet tuna tauntaun, what is this?
What do you mean?
These graphics.
And while graphics can definitely aid that experience, it is not a major selling point. You need to sell the other game features and benefits alongside the graphics. Give the customer a strong idea of how the game will play and what they will get out of experiencing it. And the third major problem was the promise of the scariest game ever made. At least on this generation. When you publicly announce that this will be the scariest thing people are going to play, you've just set up a massive expectation for your game. Marketing is all about properly communicating what the product will offer and what consumers can expect from it. If you set up incredibly high expectations, you have to deliver. Otherwise, it will seriously hurt the product. And this was the case with the Callisto Protocol. It wasn't seen as the scariest game ever made, which means players felt lied to. Their expectations weren't properly set from the very start. Then, of course, the other minor issues that we talked about, such as death animations being stuck behind a paywall, switching the universe mid-development cycle, the crunch controversy, and changing aspects of the gameplay after release, which honestly shows a misunderstanding of how players would want to experience the game and a lack of proper market research and testing prior to the release. Add all of these together, and you've got a completely misaligned marketing campaign that was actively working against the Callisto Protocol success. If developer Striking Distance Studios had properly planned out their messaging and game world, highlighted more focus points of the game other than graphics, tried to separate themselves from the Dead Space legacy and series, and didn't hype up the game as the scariest game ever made,
Whoa, what? Guys, don't be like my friend here.
I think they would have seen much greater success and a more positive player sentiment. Players wouldn't feel let down, and they ultimately wouldn't feel lied to about the game that was promised. The following year, the Callisto Protocol would release a few DLCs and several updates to improve upon the game, but none of these were at all groundbreaking. Didn't offer much to the game and didn't do much to change player perception on the game. The final DLC was a story DLC, set after the cliffhanger ending of the original game. and was marketed as the final part of the story. But it wasn't all that satisfying. And while there are several gameplay improvements over the original game, it wasn't enough to improve the overall opinion of the game or to bring back many players. When launching a game that gets received poorly, you've got two options. Work hard and try to salvage the brand, the game, and the player perception around all of it, such as with games like No Man's Sky, for example. Or two, cut your losses and move on. Unfortunately, Striking Distance Studios decided to cut their losses and move on, making only the DLCs outlined in the Season Pass and stopping all patch updates for the game less than a year after release. To top it all off, our good buddy and studio head Glenn Schofield decided to cut his losses as well, announcing that he was departing the studio he founded after a single game in September 2023. Again, less than a year after release. The future for the Callisto Protocol universe is pretty uncertain right now, but suffice to say, I wouldn't expect any new games for it anytime soon. But hey, that's marketing for you. If you liked what you heard, I would greatly appreciate if you snorted that subscribe button. And comment below, were you disappointed with the Callisto Protocol? Did you feel lied to? Could they have done anything better? If you want more, check out the video on screen where I detail Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and how its marketing failed that game. And until next time, I'm Peachpit. Stay peachy.
Hey to W. Francine, can I ask you a question? Sure, anything. Why don't you go back to your own house and stop bothering us?